Stories about abuse and molestation by Catholic priests and huge settlement continue to make the headlines. The movie Sinner is an award-winning film that takes a somewhat different perspective on the controversy, raising issues of forgiveness and redemption. Today, director Marc Benardout and screenwriter Steven Sills are here, and later in the show, we're going to hear from Patrick Smith, a former altar boy who says he was permanently altered by the church. Great to have you guys here today.
Nice to be here.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. You know, this is not the film that the obvious film that you might expect someone to make. It really does take a different look at things.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when we set out to make the film, we didn't necessarily want to, place it in the Catholic Church, but we felt, our film was about redemption, and it was a perfect canvas, to set the.
So without giving away too much, it's not necessarily the priest molesting little boys in the closet. It's more about a woman who preys on celibates.
Well, kind of. It's a film about redemption in terms of it's not necessarily about a bad Catholic priest. It's a film about a good Catholic priest.
Who sort of faces maybe some of the same temptations that priests really face in their real daily lives.
Well, the fun thing for us and what gave us the fodder for the film is that people are coming into this film with the expectation that a priest is always going to do something wrong. As they should. There is enough media, there are enough crimes out there where that is not a surprise for us when people come in and say, well, I expected him to do this and this and this. And when he doesn't, or when he overcomes it, and with still all those pressures in there, that's when people come out saying, wow, I was actually surprised, and I haven't been surprised by a film. And it was easy because that expectation is so strongly in our culture, especially America, and for good and bad reasons.
Right, and even the opening montage kind of takes you down that path with some of the more famous
Well, it's supposed
cases.
to set the tone, that you know that the main character is carrying the weight of the burdens of the church on his shoulders,
And I hate to say it though, but as you said, for good reason, these days I'm not I'm not anti-Catholic Church. I'm non-denominational, but you pretty much assume when you hear somebody's a priest, you can't help but thinking, gee, I wonder what they're up to, which is unfortunate.
It's the ick factor, and I think even what I saw, I look back at my family, and these are folks that never committed a crime in their lives, who just like to go to their church and do their thing, and that's their tradition and their culture. And I could see that this scandal, which really broke in 2002, but let's be honest, it's been going on for potentially centuries.
Right.
This has taken such a toll on them, almost in a similar way that Germans who were the next generation after World War I felt about their being German.
Oh, right.
That there's a taint to everything.
And that continues to this day, by the way, in Germany.
And Catholics now feel tainted. They do. And for your most oldest conservative Catholic to your lapsed, I used to be a Catholic, but now I'm whatever. That whole spectrum has had the same experience, which is it's as if someone in your family has done something so overwhelmingly embarrassing that now you feel like it reflects on you. And I knew that stress was there, and I knew no one was ever going to make a film about it or tell us that story, because it's an unpopular story to tell. There is a huge story right now of the victimization, as there should be. This is the worst cultural crime. And I mean, Mark and I are definitely always been clear. This is not we're not condoning this crime.
No, not
the crime and the cover-up was absolutely wrong. It's not about that. Hitler was evil, but the German grandmother out in Bavaria was just a German grandmother out in Bavaria, and that's tough for guys like us. When we first started talking about this film, to get to the point we got to, as our parents, I think, have said, they were surprised. They said, wow, this was obviously a bit of a making peace with a lot of demons for Mark and I.
Sure.
Yeah. I'm not even Catholic, I'm...
Right, I was going to say.
Yeah. So, I'm Jewish, and, making this movie was, for me, as much as for Steve, it was a very rewarding experience because we're dealing with sensibilities that right across the board people automatically overreact to.
Well, and let's just set the record straight right now. Okay, you're not Catholic.
No.
I hear your wife is though.
My wife's Catholic.
And you're Catholic.
I was raised Catholic.
Raised Catholic. Yes. Okay.
I'm from a big Irish Catholic family, and in the film we actually mention things like the Alhambra Decree, which is the law from Spain that basically had Mark's ancestors kicked out by my heritage, the Catholic heritage. And I always thought it was very funny that 500 years later, Mark and I are sitting there making a film considering redemption for the very church that we could laundry list numerous crimes. And yet that is, to us, it's live ammunition. To find redemption in the least redeemable character.
Right.
Is fun.
Now you say that you weren't trying to condone what happened, but yet again you are showing redemption and sort of forgiveness, if you will, or moving on, or whatever terms, however you want to express that. Well, I suppose the church has probably been fairly. What's the reaction been from the church or from Catholics in general? I mean, I suppose they probably liked your portrayal, I assume.
Yeah, we've had priests, we've had nuns. We just had a review by one of the Catholic media organizations worldwide that really saw a lot of merit in it. But it's a mature film. It's a film that has strong language. It is a secular film. We're secular filmmakers. So you
weren't setting out to vindicate the church or make a political
there's a
statement.
difference between what we're doing, and there's a growing genre called faith films that are very much made by people vested in their spirituality and communicating that. Mark and I were making a dramatic film.
The Passion of the Christ type of thing.
The Passion, and we can't tell you, there's numerous Christian or faith filmmakers that have come to us and say, well, this isn't really what we're doing. And no, it's not. We were making a dramatic film for anybody, but we were using the context of this pain, and it's real pain. Though we have had a lot of priests come up and say, you get us. You get that we're human beings. And I said, well, what about the language? There's masturbation. There's some pretty adult things in this. And the funniest thing was this nun who said, yeah, well, we're people. We're human beings.
Okay, so indeed, as filmmakers, so if you're looking at the human aspect of it, do you think, is the church being unrealistic with its policies? Is it setting itself up for some of these problems? That if, one thing Catholic friends of mine have said is that, let the priest marry. By forcing the priest to be celibate, do you deny some of their humanity and lead them down the path to temptation? I'm starting to sound religious myself, but lead them to temptation by other Christian faiths let people marry. You don't have to be celibate. Any thoughts on that?
I think celibacy was never a religious invention from the get-go. It was designed to allow property to stay within the Catholic Church so that pastors were not allowed to marry. So they wouldn't pass it down to their children and the church would lose property. So the whole celibacy aspect for us was more as a character in the film, because our lead character, we wanted him to be able to love, and the selfless love. I think with Steve, writing this, he had a number of complex layers that we had to, put in a scenario that, here you have a guy who wants to love. He's not allowed to love, and a woman comes into his life that's all about selling false love. So I think you would say.
And I lived in Asia for 4 years, and a lot of Americans, especially, are enamored with, in the New Age and so forth. And a lot of people have adopted Buddhism, as a faith, or very much into the struggle in Tibet and the Dalai Lama, and it has become very glamorous, very much the cause du jour, and for very good reasons. That situation, but those are celibates. Those are celibates. And we think of them as these charming spiritual characters. Celibacy has been in all cultures and all times.
Have they had any kind of scandals like that?
Yeah,
that you're aware
they're
of?
actually in Thailand and a few other countries. You always face that. Anytime you put, I think, someone in a position of absolute power or in authority, especially with people who are vulnerable, the young, the old, the infirm, the depressed, the spiritually lost, whatever you want to call that group, and you put someone in authority, human nature is one of those people is going to do something corrupt with it. And I think that's what we're seeing in the Catholic Church. The more and more, because we've been asked that question, and certainly I have some opinions, but to armchair quarterback a church that has 1 billion members, the largest denomination in the world, and you think of that, it's also, the Vatican's a sovereign nation. It's its own country. What we're really talking about is geopolitics. We're talking about, almost talking about, well, what should America do, or what should England do? Yeah, I think they have a problem in America especially, and Britain, and Australia, and several countries where people are done with it.
We'll be right back.
Smith, John Gagan, Arthur O'Brien, František Murta, Bart Matson, Paul Stanley. No problem. Intolerance, genocide, rape. Don't worry. It's a do-over. Just do it over and over and over and over. One big fat mulligan in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit.
And we are back with Marc Benardout and Steven Sills today talking about the movie Sinners. So, well, would you want your sons to be an altar boy or to work for the church?
That's a good question. Probably not, because I think, you know, it's quite an archaic job now, and I think, you know, to learn about religion, certainly for my children, I would want them to be able to make their own choice rather than be forced into it.
It's almost like leaving your kids with a certain pop singer that I won't mention, which probably wouldn't be a good idea. So this is your first feature film?
First feature film, yes.
You did a lot of commercials and music videos and that sort of thing?
I've done, yes, commercials and music videos really been my sort of grounding. But yeah, Sinner is my first feature, and it's something that Steve and I have been developing for about 4 years.
4 years.
We've worked together as producers and directors in commercials. And, you know, at the beginning of last year, we decided, you know, the time was right to, you know, go ahead and make our film. And so we raised private finance and, you know, shot it last summer in Los Angeles.
And was there something that drew you to this particular topic?
Yeah, well, you know, the screenplay went through a number of different guises. You know, we wanted to, not to give anything away with the film, but I wanted to tell a film about a blind guy that can fall in love. And we went through, you know, a judge and a sort of a widower,
Tyree,
you know, and ended up with a Catholic priest.
Oh wow! So it really didn't start at all. From
no, not at all. No, and then, you know, people have said to us, "Oh, you know, your first film, you should have made a horror movie, or you should have done a, you know, comedy." But you know, we wanted to make a story that sort of, you know, had meant something to us, you know, and we took the hard route, and it is a hard route.
Yeah.
You know.
And Steven, you're the screenwriter.
Yeah.
This was, well, I know you also wrote a story about a little boy who, based on a true story, about a 12-year-old in Al Capone, or that was yours?
Mark.
That's interesting too, by the way.
It's a short film, yeah.
But so what drew you to this particular topic then?
Well, we've been working on this kind of abstract idea in the script of senses and what is love, what is erotic love and what is non-erotic love, and is that possible? And for years, and it's one of those things, everyone has a script that they work on the side that they think, oh, that'll never get produced. It's too difficult. It's not the easy genre. It doesn't fall into an easy genre. It doesn't say all the right things. And I don't know, maybe a big star will get it, maybe they won't. And we made that film, you know, and most people don't. And we did, because frankly, it was worth the gamble for us. And basically what drew it to me was, you know, as much as I had my own venom for this own controversy, and definitely I hear what you're saying, and I agree, you know, this is a bad scandal. This is even worse than this week's announcement of $650 million in settlements. This is so much worse than that, and it's only the tip of the iceberg. And
really even the toll in the church. I mean, not to minimize what's happened to the victims, but this parish, even in the movie, is facing bankruptcy because of it. And,
absolutely.
You know, you wonder how many other, I think some dioceses already have filed for bankruptcy as a result of this. And
about three to six, and a lot of them, I think, are hiding their cards. Insurers are pulling their insurance. You know, this is a huge corporation to a certain extent, but it's also 68 million people's faith.
Right.
The largest denomination. But Catholicism is a weird one because it's always been somewhat tied to immigration and immigrants. 19th century, you had your Irish and Italian and Polish and German immigrants. And there was discrimination against immigrants, then became discriminations against Catholics, and certainly there was always this sort of, you know, Catholic, especially into the 20s. And now, of course, it's Latinos, you know, those immigrants. And so the Catholicism and immigration again. So, you know, they've always had this kind of dual discrimination and already a dismissal. And again, you know, there are some archaic elements. It is an older religion, you know, and certainly Marc, coming as both, you know, as a Jewish director from that diaspora, had a lot to bring to this film, because it's funny, he and I, we can talk about religion, very clearly, because all religions have similar issues like this. And so that's what drew it to me. And I thought it was interesting that Marc was going to direct it, because he was going to give it the objectivity. I'm too attached to it because it's my family.
But I think, you know, writing it and making a movie helped you come to terms with you know,
It
some
did.
of your lost Catholicism.
It definitely I made peace with my, I'd like to call it my culture, my ethical culture. And because I think it's really hard to say, if you have this, the worst of, you know, pedophilia, it is the worst crime.
I mean,
It is.
You know, I've
It's
been
just the
developing
worst.
this idea with Steve, and we originally had it set on a cruise ship. And this widower had gone on a.
Was
you
it
know,
the chaplain on the cruise ship?
No,
No,
this
it's
widower
a totally
had gone
different
on
script. This is
gone
how
on a,
stories
Oh,
develop.
I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, he'd gone on this cruise to sort of, you know, overcome, you know, the loss of his wife. And Steve went away, and he was going to write this, and then he came back about maybe 4 or 5 weeks later and said, "I've got it. We're going to set it in a Catholic parish, and it's the blind priest, and it's, you know."
And what was your reaction?
Well, it's Steve's, I mean, you know.
Are you crazy?
His ears were, no. Steve's a fantastic writer, and I said, well, let me read it first, you know, and I read it, and it was just fantastic, you know. It was so, you know, multi-layered, and, you know, so, you know, it was so emotional, you know, so I just thought, this is fantastic, we have to do this, you know, whether or not it's going to be a hard slog, which
But what was funny is that Marc was the one that, you know, that the original script was even darker than this and much more difficult. And Marc was the voice of reason, the voice of tolerance and redemption
So you were
for
inclined to
Catholicism.
feel a little
Because I'm an insider in a way. It's the way families can talk about things. We can say things in a much more critical sense than an outsider. So Marc actually presented, well, let's, you know, maybe just make this more balanced, more human. And it's funny, as we did that, this Father Anthony, became just this intriguing character. Because
it's
you want
amazing.
to hate him. You want to hate.
Right.
You want to think.
You know,
he's
we've been
a
to
sleaze.
film festivals, you know, around the country, and it's amazing, you know, it's amazing the reaction we've had from Catholics and lay Catholics and non-Catholics, you know, and it's just how, you know, the character of Anthony really speaks to, you know, to thousands of these people.
Well, I think some credit, of course, goes to the actors. And I noticed some reviewers have commented on the way that the main character is able to kind of go from somebody you hate at the beginning to somebody you feel sympathetic for.
Yeah.
How did you cast this, and what are your thoughts on the actors that you ended up with?
Well, the casting process was, again, you know, it was a difficult one, but it was easy in one sense, because this is, you know, as it was an independent film, we didn't have anyone saying, no, don't use that one, or don't use this one. We had limitations of budget, of course. But, you know, we chose Nick. You know, Nick, we met with a number of actors, and then when we met Nick Chinland,
He's done a lot of.
Yeah, he's done a lot of independent film, and I think he's always been, you know, always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and you know, hopefully this film will be a breakout, you know, role for him. But his father is a priest as well, so it just seemed like an Episcopal priest. It just seemed like a perfect match. You know, and then with Georgina came in to meet us, and she hustled us like she was complete
like
the character. You know,
she was playing us.
Yeah,
And,
it just,
and the character's a hustler, and we said, she's doing it already.
Yeah.
Had she already read the script? Or?
Yeah, she read the script,
yeah.
and the only thing she said is that she wouldn't do. We say hooker with a heart of gold. She's British. She said, I won't do a hot with a tart. I won't do a tart with a heart.
Yeah.
Oh,
you know, tart with a heart.
So she is British.
And she's British, and we said, fine. We don't want a hooker with a heart of gold. We want a real dimensional person. And she did it.
Yeah.
She plays 9 different looks. I mean, there were times when she'd come on set, and when she's in this blonde wig,
she's a real method actress.
and the crew, they said, "Who's the new actress?" They were like trying to hit on her, and I said, "That's Georgina, who you just saw playing this disheveled, deconstructed disaster of a person." With a lot of D's there, and she's a chameleon.
And then especially Michael, you know, who played, you know, Father Stephen, the bad priest. You know, he came in. He actually didn't even want to do the casting. He was helping his roommate out, who was coming in for a casting. So he knew all the sides off by heart, and you know, he came in and he just, you know, he said, "I've got to go now," and we were like, "No, you got to wait. You got to do it again." We wanted him to do it again, and
and Brad Dourif is an Academy Award nominated. I
Absolutely.
mean, Brad was the last one to be cast. It was the day before our read-through, and we had another actor who remained nameless who suddenly asked for all the money in the world, and we don't have any money. So
did you read Independent?
Yes, exactly.
The sign over the door says Independent.
I was like, suddenly out of the blue, I said, "What are you talking about? We're not Transformers. It's, you know, it's like a little independent film." And Brad came in just to, all right, he'll come in and think about it. And at the end of the read-through, I said, so, Mr. Dourif, what do you think? Because it's Brad Dourif. He's been in a million films. He's worked with every great director there has ever been. And he said, yeah, sure, let's do it.
Yeah, he was great.
And he was great.
Fantastic.
And he was great. And he's very understated in the film, but every moment he's there, he's insignificant.
Thank you very much, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Greg. We appreciate the support.
The movie is Sinners. We'll be right back. And joining me now is Patrick Smith. He was a former addiction and family counselor in Australia, and he used to be an altar boy in Ireland. Great to have you back again today, Patrick.
Thank you, Greg.
So,
Pleasure.
what was your experience in the church?
Well, my experience in the church was typical of Ireland, that we were indoctrinated from a young age.
How young?
From, I guess, I started school at about 3.5, 4 years of age.
Okay.
And my first experience of indoctrination was from the Reverend Mother of that infant school, and she told us that when we went to sleep at night, we had to sleep with our arms outside of the sheets and folded across our chest.
And why's that?
Well, her reasoning was that in case we died during the night, it would save people the trouble of laying us out.
Oh, wow.
But as
It's kind of heavy for little kids, but okay.
yeah, but it was really about keeping the hands away from the body.
I see. So,
And
you didn't...
Of course, we didn't understand that at that age, but it seemed bizarre. But the threat of death, that we could die at any moment, was always imminent and used to their advantage. That was the stick that they beat us with, if you like.
And later, this became something, though, more of a sexual nature as you became older?
Yeah, when I was about 12, I guess, I was just starting high school or secondary school, as they call it in Ireland, and a missionary priest came along, and he was going to say a mass and give a sermon, but also hear our confessions, and the confession was compulsory. So as class went on, we went individually into the confessional, or office as it was, and the priest was sitting there in an armchair, and went in. I was very nervous about it, and because it was the first time outside of a confessional box that I was face to face with a priest talking about sinning.
Sure.
And, so I knelt at a distance away from him, and he said, "No, come closer." And so I moved a couple of feet closer, but he said, "No, come, rest your arms on my knees." And so I was right up against him, and then his hand came around the back and started fondling me, and the thing that concerned me most about that whole episode was that he reached into my back pocket and took out a little diary that I had and started to go through it and read it, and that was such a violation. And this was by somebody who was God's representative here, and it was so confusing and conflicting in my psyche, and I wanted to run out of there, but
Sure.
the threat from the head brother was outside waiting.
So you had to stay
so I had to stay and suffer this, and then not talk about it.
And did it go beyond fondling at that point, or?
No, it didn't go beyond fondling at that point, and but it was really inappropriate fondling. That was just emotionally. I felt like crying at the time, because I felt so invaded and so challenged in that situation, and it was a complete power abuse.
Was this the only time, or was there another time?
That was the only time that there was a sexual connotation to the abuse, but there was another time again in a confessional box, and it was probably within 6 weeks. And my mother took me to confession and to the local church, a huge church, and we went up the top, confessional box on the left-hand side, went in, and I started to do the usual, "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned." It's 2 weeks since my last confession. And he said something, he mumbled something, and I couldn't hear. And so he started again, and so I started again and went through the rigmarole, and he mumbled something again, and I couldn't hear him. And so I thought I was doing something wrong, so I started again, "Bless me, Father." And then he roared at me, "What age are you?" And I said, I'm 9, 10, 11. I couldn't think in the moment. And then he said, "Get out," roared at me, "Get out of here, I'm not hearing your confession, get out of here," you know. And then I had to come out of the confessional box, face a room, this church full of people waiting for confession, and thinking that I was the worst person, that because my confession wasn't being heard. How bad are you when the priest won't hear your confession?
Well, probably better you didn't stick around and find out what was going to happen there. I don't know. Well, thank you very much for being here today, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you next time. The movie is Sinner.